Good evening and welcome to the Celtic Trust and Celtic Shared live Q&A event. My name's Paul John Dykes and I'm absolutely privileged to be able to offer our platform at Celtic State of Mind to open up this debate, to answer any queries, to answer any questions that you may have, air your views, ask your questions, raise your concerns. I'm joined by Natasha Meikle from a Celtic State of Mind, and we also have on the panel Eddie Toner, Jeanette Findlay and David Lowe from the Celtic Trust. Welcome to the event, ladies and gents, as well as Cormac Ryan. Cormac, welcome to the event. And thanks, Paul Quigley from Celtic Shared. Now, this is basically us using the technology to put out to the wider audience the whole process and purpose of the shares for value proposal. Any questions that come in through the comment section, Natasha and I will be able to put to the panel. But we'll also be speaking to a number of Celtic podcasts this evening, because Celtic are blessed with having some tremendous output in the fan media section. So we have Kev from North Curve. Welcome to the show, Kev. And also Hamish from 67 Hail Media. So first and foremost, what we'll do, Paul, if you want to introduce yourself, we'll go round the panel first of all, and then we'll go to the podcasts and they can start asking some relevant questions that they have and perhaps their listeners have as well. So welcome, Paul. Let us know a wee bit about yourself.
Hi there, Paul John. Thanks very much for having us on and for being willing to facilitate this discussion. Obviously, it's the sort of first of its kind, but hopefully it's something that, you know, the audience can get a lot out of, and it allows for an in-depth discussion and bit of debate about the share issue at hand here. My name's Paul Quigley. I'm one of the members of Celtic Shared, and we are obviously a campaign that's recently set up to promote fan issues and in the long-term campaign for fan ownership. So we're very happy to be invited along by yourselves and by the Celtic Trust here tonight.
David Lowe, you're the chairman at the Celtic Trust. I spoke to you last week. Tell us a wee bit about where you are and introduce yourself and your colleagues, Jeanette, Eddie and Cormac.
Okay, so I've been involved with the Celtic Trust since January last year, when everything in the garden was relatively rosy. I thought this was going to be fun, being involved with the Celtic Trust. And of course, things haven't worked out that way. So I got involved to help promote greater share ownership. Ownership of shares is ownership of Celtic. We have 25,000 shareholders. A lot of them have become disconnected from their shares. And one of the core campaigns for the Trust last year was to help unite shareholders with their shares whilst working in conjunction with Celtic. And that was going swimmingly well, just as the season was unravelling. So as we speak, you know, at the end of, right now, basically, we have no trophies. We've lost the 10. We're in the middle of COVID. And you know, the immediate outlook's tough for football and Celtic as well. So I'm here tonight. Jeanette Findlay, acting secretary, is here tonight. Eddie Toner's a member of one of the committees, the shareholders committees, and we are here to answer questions that other organisations may have in respect of the Trust proposal for issuing shares in form of value to season ticket holders who shelled out best part of 25 million this season.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion. Let's get started. Kev, you've joined us from North Curve Celtic, and you and your audience may have some burning questions to ask the panel. What are your thoughts? What are your concerns or questions that you want to raise?
So, just firstly, thanks for having us on as well. We sort of make up the boys and girls in the North Curve. Approximately about 700 memberships, so we've kind of been we've done surveys and different things like that to try and gauge a kind of idea of how everybody feels about this campaign and stuff. And I think, I mean, I'm on just representing. There's a lot of guys, a lot of girls with different sort of ideas, different mentalities within our block, but sort of asking for the kind of ordinary punter. Basically, like, you know, who's maybe not interested in shares or interested in, AGMs or anything like that, just interested in going to the games, is, why should they really be supporting this? What difference is this going to make to them? As I say, somebody that's just not get much interest, maybe somebody that's been through the last year or last season has shelled out, 500-600 quid or whatever on their season book, and is maybe just interested in getting a bit of dough back or getting a bit of money back in their pocket. So maybe better starting with that and just asking on behalf of somebody like that, as I say, isn't interested in anything, like isn't interested in the trust, gaining more power or anything. What difference is this going to make to them?
I'll throw that one out to the panel. David, would you like to pick up on that one?
Well, at the start of, or in March last year, chasing the 10 Celtic supporters went for 50,000 season tickets at £500 plus and put in £25 million plus to further the cause of another treble and a 10. We did that after COVID had unfolded. We did it because we're Celtic fans, and we were congratulated that in effusive terms by the club in June. Thanked for our magnificent support, etc. So that's great, and we all set off on the journey, and of course that journey's been horrible. Everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, and here we are finishing the season, not having seen a game this season, and we're reaching the stage where the club's about to ask us for another, call it 25 million if it's the same as previous seasons, for another campaign. And I don't think there's a Celtic fan anywhere that would think anything other than that's going to be a hard sell within the context of what's happened, within the context of a lack of clarity as to whether we'll actually be able to sit or stand in our positions for the start of next season. So it's a very, very unhealthy backdrop. And amidst that backdrop, the club did make a pledge on the 23rd of June to supporters, and they also made a pledge to hospitality holders, of which I'm one, to return cash. So we don't think, or the trust doesn't think money leaving Celtic is a good thing. We want to see money retained in Celtic so that the new manager, whoever it is, has as much money as possible. And we want to stimulate season ticket sales as much as possible. And we want to help the football club achieve those objectives as much as possible. And our proposal should be seen in that light. And indeed, the offer that we made to the board said that. When we sent it the 24th of February, it said, as shareholders in the club, and that means owners, that's what shareholders means, the Celtic Trust would like to work with the club in creating a positive dynamic for season 21-22. And we believe our proposal helps progress this. And we also said it's not meant to be interpreted in any other light other than that. And the 5 reasons that we gave were, number one, our proposal preserves the cash during unprecedented and difficult times for the club, i.e. keeps the money in the club rather than taking money out the club. It creates a positive dynamic for the sale of season tickets, a feel-good factor, if you like, or a feel-better factor, if not a good factor. It also brings a younger generation of supporters into the ownership position if they took up this offer. There hasn't been a share issue since 2005. So that's a good thing. Owning part of your club is a good thing. And of course, it helps restore the original Fergus McCann objective of a stronger supporter ownership profile in the club. It's important that supporters own as much of their club as possible, because it is our club. And our proposal was designed, or is designed, to achieve all those objectives. We also said that we're willing to work with Celtic, clarify anything with Celtic, and assist Celtic in all these matters. So I don't think any reasonable Celtic anywhere would consider this proposal anything other than a good thing.
Paul, Quigley, just to come to yourself at Celtic Shared, what would you say to the ordinary fan who has no interest in Celtic shares? When you look at, obviously, the situation we've had this season, we were promised extra value. I don't think many Celtic fans would reckon we've had that. What would you say to those who aren't that interested in receiving the value through shares?
I think Kev asked a really interesting question, and I understand why people are, sort of put off that aspect of things, because it's not the reason that most of us became football fans in the first place. What I would say, though, is that if the last year has taught us anything, is that it's quite clear, in my opinion, that the Celtic board is detached from the ordinary fan, which is why, for me, this proposal not only does it ensure fans get the value back for the money that they paid in season tickets, but it will ensure that ordinary fans, not just like Kev or the boys and girls in the North Curve, but those who sit across Celtic Park, will have a greater collective say, because they'll all have a ability to have an input in the decision-making process at Celtic, or they'll certainly be able to hold people to account. Added to what David said as well, is that if we want to rebuild our squad, if we want to challenge to reclaim the title next season, the club is going to need to sell season tickets. It's going to need to start bridging the divide that exists between the fans and the club. And it's going to take a united effort. And unfortunately, I think time is running out a little bit on the club for the renewals. And a proposal like this, in one swoop, brings the support back on side. I think would have a positive impact on season book sales, and would give us a boost going into next season, and hopefully allow the incoming manager to make a go of it.
I think that's a great point, Paul. I'm going to come to Cormac and ask your view on that. David had mentioned that one of the points... the positive dynamic, really, getting the fans back on side for season ticket sales.
Yeah, and I was just about to jump in there, coming back to Kev's question about the fan who only cares about that bit of cash in their pocket, because I can really understand that. You know, I'm not a wealthy man myself, so like every penny counts, every penny's a prisoner. So if this proposal, it gives the opportunity, the way I see it, it creates a win-win situation for club and fans. It brings the fans back on side. It doesn't create an ill will, but it means that by issuing shares to the fans, they've got something that then has a monetary value, which if they're stuck for the cash, can be transferred into the cash. If they decide they want to hold on to it, that's their choice as well. And obviously, there's probably loads of the Celtic fans out there who would hold on to it purely because they want that sense, the points that Paul just touched on there before me, without repeating them, but that sense of ownership and the ability to make a contribution to the club. But to really address that question that Kev brought up there, it gives them something that they can then, if they need the money, they can turn into money without the club getting hit with a massive self-inflicted wound of having to pay out cash. I see it as a win-win situation.
I'm going to ask, thanks very much, Cormac. I'm going to ask Jeanette and Eddie as well. All around this value, this added value, at any point has the club disclosed or engaged with fans to say, this is what we expect to give you as added value? Have we been given any indication as to what their plans are for this added value?
What happened was that after the meeting in June between the club and about 7 Celtic supporters organisations, they made it clear during that meeting. Remember, this is in 2020, so we know that we've missed some games at the end of the previous season. We had no clue how many games we're going to miss in the next season. Everything was very up in the air. But what was said was that they would absolutely be looking to maintain the value of the season ticket. So that was the terms in which it was sort of discussed. And we were very mindful of the fact that it was impossible for anybody to be able to say what that would look like, because at that point nobody knew how many games would be missed. So what we agreed at that meeting was that there would be something, that the club would consult with the fan organisations before deciding what something would be, and that they would put out a statement at that time, which they did on the 23rd of June, setting that out. So we have been asking to meet them in the last month to have that discussion, and they have not yet given us a date to meet them. So the club has not engaged with us at all, despite a public commitment that they would do that, but we still expect them to do that.
Thank you, Jeanette.
I think that in itself demonstrates the sort of a gap there is at the moment in terms of, communication between the people who are running the club and the people who fund the club, us the supporters. I'm fed up hearing platitudes for the likes of Peter Lawwell and other people about how important the supporters are to Celtic and how it's our club and blah, blah, blah. And then, then we hear nothing from them. This has been probably the toughest season, and probably, I don't know, a lot of people's living memory for Celtic. And it's been tough on the park and undoubtedly tough off the park. The gap for me between the board, if you like, and the supporters is now bigger than it has been at any time in my Celtic supporting life. And that goes back to, previous to, the old board and the old regime. I remember the demonstrations outside the park. I remember turning up at Chelsea Hall and various different, the Welsh halls and various different places like this, back in the Sales for Change movement, in a hope that we could get more of a say in how our club runs and maybe have more of a stake in the club. And I think that's why, to answer Kev's question, that's why the ordinary punter on the stand, if you like, should back this proposal. Because it's about, for me, it's twofold. It's about the board taking a big leap of faith and saying, in actual fact, it's not just platitudes. We're not just here to pat you on the shoulder and say, these are the greatest fans in the world and it's your club and we're the Celtic family. It's about them saying, we actually acknowledge that and we want you all to be a part of it. And one surefire way to make us all a part of that would be to give us all individual shares in the ownership of the club. And maybe eventually have more of an active say in the important decisions around the club and how they affect the fans. So I think, the fans could really have taken, the board could really have taken a leap of faith and said, we're going to get the punters back on board. And what a strong message that would have sent out, on the back of a horrendous season. Everything that could have went wrong has gone wrong. It would have sent you a really strong message, and I'm convinced that the punters then would have said, right, okay, it's been a bit of a cock-up. Things didn't go the way we planned, but we're willing to go again, and we're willing to back them. Now, there are probably 25,000, 30,000 that will back them regardless, and I think everybody knows that. Probably include myself in that. When the season ticket renewal comes out, I'll probably be one of the first to renew regardless. But not everybody's in a position to do that. And a lot of people are waiting to see what's happening. And this would have sent a really, really strong message out to the fans saying, we value your support and we appreciate it. But it would also have given the fans that piece of paper, if you like, that certificate says to them, actually, I'm not just turnstile fodder. I actually own a wee bit of this club and I'm part of this club. For me, like Cormac, I just think this was a complete no-brainer and a complete win-win for everybody. And I think it would have sent out a massive message. And I know the board have not ruled this out completely, but the signs we're getting is they're not really in favour of it. But if they really want to encourage the people to back them and the punters to get behind them, this is a no-brainer for them, as far as I'm concerned.
Thanks very much for your comments. Kev, are you quite happy with that? Do you have any further follow-up questions on the back of your original point there?
I've got a few wee things sort of jotted down here. I think maybe the only one, if I'm going to raise one more, is that I think everybody would be, especially our membership and our boys and girls that come with a very sort of anti-modern football, PLC maybe type mentality that would be all for, more say in the club, possibly long term sort of maybe looking at fan ownership and different things like that. But short term, is there any, or would you guys say there's any real risk of there's one or two sort of shareholders and investors that have no really any attachment to the club, solely from a business point of view? Is there any risk in doing this that these guys could gain more power through it, or could gain more of a stake in the club, which would then lead to, no sort of big problems we can go into? We can speak about Desmond and stuff like that, but you could be looking at real sort of problems if certain other kind of factions, as I said, gain a wee bit more power. It was just to see if, I don't know who that's best for, David or whoever, if they think that would be a risk of happening.
What do you think, David? I think you touched on this last week.
Right, so first thing, Celtic fans bought a world record amount of shares for a football club in 1994. They did it when they were asked to step up because the club was in a very difficult situation at the time. And most of those people still own their shares. And that's 25 years plus ago. So Celtic fans, as a generalism and as a rule, don't buy Celtic shares to make money. They buy them and they hold them because they want to own part of the club. And the share register today tells you that that's true. So I'm not expressing an opinion, I'm stating a fact. So we buy shares because we want to own part of the club, and we want to have an influence in the saying of things at the club, and we hold on to them. So I think it's a bit of a scary story from maybe one or two folk with an agenda that if you gave a whole lot of Celtic fans shares, they would immediately rush out and sell them all. I don't think that's a true statement. I think that's a scare story. And I think it's preposterous to think that, and I'm going to mention the name Lindsay Train, the unemotional investor in Celtic, who would be standing in the sidelines sweeping up this volley of shares that are coming on the market from a whole lot of Celtic shareholders is ridiculous. It's just preposterous. Lindsay Train didn't get the shareholding they have by buying up lots of little pockets of shares from small shareholders. They got it because some fat cat sold it to them. That's how they get their shareholding. And every time, because of the size of their shareholding, every time they make a purchase, they've got to make an announcement. So I don't think there's a serious prospect of, buying £500 worth of shares, making an announcement every day, because every day there's a Celtic shareholder selling shares. I just don't see any of this happening at all. Having said all that, there's 25,000 shareholders. There's only one of them really that's in it for money, and that's Lindsay Train. They're in it for money because they're an investment company. If you read their articles of association, are in the business of making money. Now, the only way that they're going to make money is if Celtic do one of these Super League things, because Celtic shares have performed poorly since Fergus McCann left in 1999. Celtic shares have lost 60% of their value. So what I'm basically saying is nobody really buys Celtic shares to make money. They buy Celtic shares because they love Celtic and they want to be part of it, apart from Lindsay Train. Lindsay Train don't pretend to be Celtic fans. Lindsay Train are placing a bet that Celtic end up in a better jurisdiction than they're in just now. And that basically is Celtic in some other league with access to television monies. And if that were to happen, the Celtic shares would rise considerably. And again, the proof, if I can call it that, of that principle is that, there was a rumour in the press a week ago when the Super League was announced that, Celtic and Rangers were going to be invited into some sort of British league, and the Celtic shares went up 10, 15 pence. Well, if that were to really happen, they would double, treble or something like that. So it's a sort of long-winded answer to a question, but I'm basically dismissing the spectre of a floodload of Celtic fans selling little amounts of shares, all getting swept up by Lindsay Train. I just don't see that happening at all.
Thanks very much for that, David. And Ker, I'm just keen to get on to Hamish, make sure Hamish has the opportunity to air any views that he or his listeners have had. But thank you very much, Kevin, for your questions so far. Really appreciate the discussion. Hamish, what's your thoughts? What have you been gathering between yourself and your audience in relation to the Celtic Shared and this movement?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I think it's it's an imperfect time, isn't it? I mean, Celtic are going through a bad period, and some of it's enforced and some of it's been put upon us by the pandemic. One of the main things I think that's come out from people that have been getting in touch with 67 Hail Hail has been, the Celtic Trust. I read the frequently asked questions on the website, and it was quite informative. But I think maybe some people would just want to know what the catch is, and if it is a perfect scenario, why are Celtic not seemingly keen on this? One question I had, it says on the Celtic Trust website that this would cost the club nothing, I think, other than small admin fees. So I mean, are there any other non-financial costs to the club or major shareholders? Maybe such as dilution of current shares, and if so, does it make it unlikely that Celtic would go for this proposal?
First and foremost then, I'll throw that out to the panel and see if anyone wants to pick up on that point that Hamish raised there.
Well, I mean, I can answer it if you want, but maybe somebody else. Shall I answer it?
Yeah, go ahead.
On you go, David.
Well, dilution. Dilution. This is the second big scary story. Oh, we're all going to get diluted. Well, first of all, the issue of new shares has only been made possible by the Celtic board. It was the Celtic board that proposed the resolution on the 14th of December. It was the Celtic board that recommended everybody voted in favour of the resolution on the 14th of December, and it was the Celtic board with their block vote that did vote in favour of the resolution. So it's the Celtic board that created the conditions for issuing shares without first offering them to all the other shareholders. So you only do that if you see a possibility of or a need to issue the shares. So who were they planning to dilute? Because nobody really cares if a small shareholder owns 0.0001 and he ends up with 0.00099. That's dilution, but it's inconsequential dilution. The only people that have something to say about dilution are, half a dozen big cheesies who get diluted, have the potential, doesn't actually mean dilution, have the potential to be diluted if shares are issued to season ticket holders. So dilution, quite frankly, is not going to change the ownership profile of Celtic to any great degree at all. Dilution doesn't really have any financial effect because Celtic ordinary shares don't pay any dividends and never have paid any dividends. And as I said earlier, nobody buys Celtic shares for capital growth because they've lost 60% of their value since 1999. We buy Celtic shares and we want Celtic shares because we're Celtic fans and we want to own part of Celtic and we hold on to them by and large. So I don't think dilution is a plausible excuse for not considering the share proposal, particularly as it was the board that created the conditions for issuing the shares in the first place.
No, thanks very much for that. Yes, please do, Paul.
Not just to, I'll certainly leave the discussion of shares and dilution and financial stuff to David and Jeanette. But I just wanted to come in quickly to, I think it's an interesting point that Hamish makes that, why is it then, if it's apparently a sort of win-win, why is it that the board are seemingly sort of hesitant to engage with this? And for me, the answer to that is quite simple in that, there has been a cost to bear by the pandemic. The club would usually be able to rely on season ticket money. And really, for me, they have a choice at this point. The choice is for them to allow the fans to basically bear the brunt of the pandemic paying 20, 25 million pounds in season ticket money for games they've not been able to attend. The ordinary punter paying out £500, a household paying over £1,000, for a £90 stream. That's one option that they have, to just allow it to fall on the ordinary fan. But this proposal gives them the opportunity to make sure that doesn't happen. But what they would need to do is it would have an impact, a very slight impact, as David said, on the heavy hitter investors. So for me, this is an issue of priorities. What matters most to the club? Is it the ordinary supporters that sustain the club year on year, or is it the mega shareholders? And that's the fundamental question that the club have been asked to consider with this proposal, in my opinion, and we'll find out where their priorities lie soon enough.
Yeah,
Can I just
chip in
add
there. Sorry, I was just going to chip in just for a wee bit, not for a long bit. The phrase that should be used, and it's been used twice already, is positive dynamic. This proposal creates a positive dynamic. This is proposals to help Celtic, not to attack Celtic. And there's a few people have got to work out, the difference between what's best for themselves and what's best for the club. That's what it all boils down to. Because I've not yet met a Celtic fan yet that thinks it's a good thing for Celtic to do nothing. Because there'll be a huge drop in season ticket sales if Celtic do nothing. So that doesn't seem to me like a good thing for Celtic. And so you've got to juxtapose, whatever the word is, what's good for Celtic. So we're trying to do something that's good for Celtic. And nobody's come up with anything to suggest that it's not good for Celtic, just that it might not be good for some people. Or, we're not smart enough to handle shares and we'll dump them all on the market. It's not really clever, is it?
Yeah, Cormac, you were going to come in yourself.
Thanks very much. Yeah, no, just following on from what was said there, and in terms of catch, I don't really see one apart from what David and Paul have already touched on. But just to emphasise, I suppose, we didn't just pull this out of the sky. We didn't, one day we didn't come up and think this is a way to trip. This is a way to have a go at the club. This is actually the Celtic Trust trying to come with a constructive, a really positive way of addressing an issue that we're not asking for anything out of the ordinary here. We're asking for the club to deliver on their commitment. And it's really important that we stress that. This is the commitment the club made to their reliable, dedicated fans who always step into the breach. And this gives that constructive, positive way of creating a respectful relationship and moving on to next season to hopefully winning ways. But in a way that's not damaging to the club, but which I think can only build positivity and build a respectful relationship between club and fans, and to be constructive.
One of the biggest things we see or hear on a daily basis is that fractured relationship between the club and the supporters. Hamish, I'm going to ask Natasha to update us with any comments that are coming in before we wrap up this section, but I will come back to you because I appreciate that you didn't have much of an opportunity there, as this discussion obviously is one that will rage on. Natasha, is there anything interesting coming in from the comments field?
Yeah, there's a lot of comments coming in, so thanks to everyone who's watching across the social media channels, and remember you can comment and we'll put them to the guys live. One of the ones that's come up a few times, I think, can be summarised with this one here. Is it not a concern that people will want or need financial compensation in order to pay for renewals next season as cash rather than shares? And shares are different to cash, we know that. So what can you say to answer the people who say, I don't want shares, what I want is a cash refund or something that I can put towards next year's season ticket?
Yeah. The proposal that was actually put to the club is that shares be offered as an option. And so if they were minded to make a cash refund, and I think lots of people have made the point that they changed the terms and conditions and they wouldn't necessarily be obliged to make a cash refund and all of that. But if they were minded to make a cash refund, as people actually might, quite justifiably want to have, nothing in this proposal prevents them from doing that. It's about an option. It's about saying you have an option to do one or the other. And as you rightly say, it is also the case that if you have shares and you subsequently want to have cash, then you can sell them. But nothing that we're saying is preventing the club from offering a cash refund. I suppose that's what we would say to that.
Just touching on the comment that's come up, which kind of leads on from that. Sorry, wrong one. Would you say that the trust have plans in place to buy the shares from fans who would rather take the refund? So if there's fans who don't want shares and want the cash, if they instead do take the share, would Celtic share them or Celtic Trust then buy these shares off the fans?
Yeah, to the limits of what we have. I mean, we have, a growing membership, and that brings with it regular income. And we have already bought shares from fans who want to sell shares. So yeah, to the extent that we can afford them up to the limits, and each month there's more money coming in, we would buy shares that became available in that way.
Another question that we've had come up a few times is, how do people join Celtic Trust or Celtic Shared? What would you say to the normal fan who likes what they're hearing, thinks it sounds great and wants to get involved? What would you say to them if they're listening right now?
Well, I'll answer for Celtic Shares and I'll make Celtic Trust, and I'll let Paul answer for Celtic Share. To join the Celtic Trust is really very straightforward. You go to the website www.celtictrust.net, and you click on the link, and there's an FAQ that says, how do I become a member? And that explains the process. It's really straightforward. You simply register, and there's a subscription, which is the minimum of £5 a month, which is the membership fee. And that money is used to buy shares in the name of the trust and to run the organisation. So that's how you become a member of the trust.
I'll just come over to you, Paul. What about Celtic Shared? How do people get involved in that, and what can someone listening do to be more involved?
Yeah, so I mean, we're obviously an entirely different type of organisation to the Trust. We're more a campaigning body. First of all, I'd just be urging people to join the Trust. You know, the more people join the Trust, the more shares can be bought, the more power we can hopefully begin to acquire in the club that we all love. In terms of Celtic Shared, we're a campaigning body. Obviously, we've been sort of very much focused on this proposal over the last month. We don't have a sort of formal membership, but we do have a list of supporters that we're in contact with via email and have another form of communication linked up. So you'll be able to find our details on the Twitter account. Get in touch. We'll be more than happy to include you within a list of supporters and notify you of the things that we're campaigning on, and hopefully, added to that list, and we can do our best to work on your behalf as well.
Thanks, Paul. We'll take one more from the comment section at the moment before we come back to you guys on the panel. And this one's coming on YouTube from Stephen. What value of shares is the Trust looking to get back for each season ticket holder? Is that something that you've considered yet, and what value would you put on that?
I mean, I don't think they'll put a value on it at all. I mean, that's really for the club to consider. What we did was we put the proposal to the club in a manner that we thought was helpful. And as I say, we thought, it was a win for the club and it was a win for the fans. And we're waiting on them to come back, their formal response to that. And it's really for them to put a value on it, I think. I mean, I don't think you can put a hard figure on it, because different people will feel that they'll have a different view on what added value is, and what they felt they were paying for, and what they felt they got, and and everybody will think maybe differently for that. So, I mean, I think it would be fair to say that we're waiting on the club to come back to a response. But what we did in good faith was put what we thought was a very good proposal, a fan-led proposal that came from a supporters trust meeting as well. Discussed and agreed by a meeting with probably over 200 people there. So. The ball's in the club support in that regard, I would say.
Paul, did
Can
you
I come in on that one, Natasha? Yeah, just briefly. I mean, obviously, Eddie's right in the sense that, there's maybe not an exact figure, and it's difficult to come to that. I think it's an important point to note, though, that on average, people spent about £550 on their season ticket this season. Most clubs of a similar size, stature, revenue across Europe haven't done what Celtic have done, charging full price, only to give fans a stream. So in terms of the value of the stream, Celtic TV is available to be brought, if you're based in mainland Europe, for £180, and you get every home and away game of the league season for that. So we've got half of that. We've only been given the home games. So we've been given, by Celtic's own estimation, £90 in value, having spent over £500 each. And that's assuming there's only one person. So as much as there can be a discussion about, what the number would be, there's a deficit there that has to be addressed. And I think that's a key point to point out.
Thanks, Paul. We'll come to Hamish now, patiently waiting with questions. Hamish, do you have your next one for the guys?
Yeah, I've just got a couple of quick ones. It should hopefully be a wee bit easier to answer than the first one. You may have kind of touched on it, just that question. I think it was Stephen, as the guy's name was on YouTube. Mm-hmm. I'm intrigued to know, what value, what total value of shares are we talking about here? 50,000 odd season tickets. I think the figure 25 million was mentioned earlier. And roughly what would that equate to in the overall picture at Celtic? And the other question is, I'll just join to it, would each season ticket holder receive a standard number of shares, or would it equate to, the amount of money they've paid for their season ticket? Because obviously there's different prices. It goes from, I think, a kids ticket at £50 up to probably, £600, £700.
Yeah. Well, I'll have a go at that one. So, as Eddie Toner said earlier, these matters are up to Celtic. Our proposal is designed, and I keep coming back to it, create a positive dynamic. The extent of that positive dynamic is decided by the club, whether they want to make it 50 quid, 100 quid, or 200 quid, or nothing. If it's nothing, you might only sell 30,000 tickets. If it's 100, 200 or whatever, it's to create a positive dynamic with the objective of selling 50,000 season tickets for the new challenge with the new manager, so that the manager has as much money as possible to spend on the rebuilding of the team. But these are all matters for the club to consider. They're all directors, and that they're paid to make these decisions. We've come up with a proposal. We want to discuss it with them, but it's all to do with a positive dynamic. Having said that, number one, you don't know what the amount of refund is. Number two, you don't know what percentage of people would take up the refund, because there's lots of Celtic fans. There might even be some in this programme tonight that don't want anything. There might be some that want cash. There might be some that just don't renew. You don't know, because we're a broad church and a wide spectrum. So it's impossible to tell. And you can speculate, if it's 200 quid and half of them went for it, that's like 6.25 million, which is 1.5 Barcases, So it's impossible to put a number on it. But the objectives, the positive dynamic, sort of change the trajectory of where we are. We're in a horrible space at the moment. We want to start looking up and start looking forward, and we're trying to come up with proposals to facilitate that.
Excellent, David. Thanks for that. Does anyone have anything to add to Hamish's final couple of points there?
Just a bit about the positive dynamic. I mean, I was saying earlier about the importance of it being constructive, and it's been a hell of a season. I mean, we've all been really angry and spitting feathers at times, but it's important to take that anger and then work with it. If we just continually, keep giving out, that can get toxic in its own way. But it's about moving forward now and taking our experience of the last year and using it constructively, and that's what this proposal has been all about. It's bringing something constructive to work and move forward.
I understand why people are asking some of that detail, and I understand why Hamish is relaying that to us. But I think what people need to understand is that this is a proposal in principle. It's saying whatever it is, whatever amount it is that you think that you owe us, in a sense, we want you to make an offer in terms of shares. We want you to offer us shares, because the more people who take up shares, the less money comes out of the club, whatever that value is. And that's not something that we could insist on. We could talk about what the range of that might be. So it might be 550 minus 90. So it might be from there downwards. But But I think the key thing I would hope that Hamish would take back to the people, that read his website and listen to his podcast, which is very good, should take, is that these are all things to be discussed once the thing is agreed in principle. So that's the point.
Brilliant. Now, Kev and Hamish, you have both been very patient there, because obviously once this discussion starts, there is so much to get through that you were able to sit for about 20 minutes each there and just soak it all in. Kev, thank you very much for joining us and representing Northcurve Celtic. Hamish, same to yourself from 67 Hail Hail Media. Everybody tune into these guys' content online. Now, what I'm going to do is say goodbye to our two contributors here, and we'll bring in the next two. So thanks very much, and hopefully we'll speak to you again soon, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks very much, mate.
Everyone.
Now, coming into the discussion, we hope to have another three guests. At the moment, I can confirm that we have Andrew Milne from More Than 90 Minutes. Andrew also hosts the Celtic Soul podcast as well. Some tremendous guests on that recently. We also have, I think it will be Andy from Four Tims. I won't know until he comes onto the screen, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But first of all, welcome Andrew Milne to the discussion. How are you, Andrew?
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, all good. We can see you and hear you. And also, is it Andy from Four Tims?
Is I? How are we doing?
We're good, Andy. Now, you have been sitting there patiently listening to the discussion. I'll come to Andrew Milne first and foremost. Andrew, obviously you've got a big readership and also a big audience online as well. What kind of thoughts are coming through to yourself? What queries or concerns have been raised to you?
Everything's been positive. Very positive. There's a bit of toxic on Twitter, but generally everyone is positive with this because there is no other show. There's no other show in town. No one has proposed anything. The club have proposed nothing. The club, it will be a goodwill gesture if they offer the shares, the season book holders, because I believe legally they don't have to. But I think after the season we've had, it would be a very nice gesture as we go in now to the next season and a new chapter.
I think that's an interesting point, Andrew. You know, bringing up the legalities. Paul Quigley, I'll come to yourself. We're talking about a positive dynamic this evening around, you know, the fact that we are going to be trying to pitch season tickets to the same season ticket holders that we're referring to. What would you say would happen if the club dug their heels in here and started quoting legalities? And as Andrew Milne says, rather than look at the goodwill gesture and build some bridges here?
Well, look, we all know that the club changed the terms and conditions, prior to people signing the renewals. That isn't news to anyone, though I do understand that the trust are maybe looking in, or well looking into the legal aspect. But I don't think this is a legal argument. You know, I don't think that is a route that anyone wants to go down, you know, legal challenges, lawyers, that type of dispute. For me, the club have a moral obligation to their supporters, and that stems from meetings that we held with supporters organisations last summer. So I was party to some of those meetings, as was Jeanette, by the main 5 or 6 supporters organisations met with the club last summer, round about the time when we were discussing what the new season might look like in, you know, this new COVID world that we were living in. Now, at the time when we had those meetings, you know, restrictions were just beginning to loosen slightly after the first lockdown, and what was happening was there was a discussion, there was a bit of naivety, a bit of optimism that we thought, you know, 5 or 6 games will maybe not be in the stadium, and then you'll start seeing an easing back to football as we know and love it. So when we met the club, what had happened was there was a discussion around that, and what we were discussing along with the other fan orgs was, look, if we miss 6 games, the fans should get those 6 games back. Either 1 or 2 games free if they keep buying their season ticket until that is sort of squared off. And that was the kind of general principle of the meeting, that, you know, there had to be maintaining the value of the season ticket. Fans had to get equal value for the money they put in. And there was consensus. There was consensus among the fan orgs, consensus with the club as well, who understood and accepted that position. But what they did say is that they couldn't tell us how that would be manifested, how would they put that into action? Because at that point, we didn't know how long it would be before fans get back in the stadium. And what they agreed to do was they agreed to consult fan organisations as we went through the season, and when it became apparent when fans would be allowed back in. Obviously, it's obvious to everyone that fans aren't going to be back in. It's been clear for some time that there wouldn't be fans there at all. So the club have had quite a lot of time now to prepare for how they will provide that value that they promised fan organisations last summer. And it was after that meeting that the club put out their statement whereby they said that fans could be rest assured that they would receive value for the season. But fans could be rest assured. And for me, that is the key in terms of the obligation that Celtic have. It's not a legal obligation. Nobody wants to take Celtic to court. Nobody's interested in, that type of fight. But for me, having been in those meetings and part of what were constructive discussions, there was no animosity, it wasn't confrontational. For me, the club have a responsibility to live up to the word.
Thanks very much for that, Paul.
Can I jump in just after that as well? Yeah, it was it is that moral imperative, I feel, and that treating fans with respect. On the terms and conditions bit, the legality of it, I've seen that bit of an attitude of you signed up for it, tough, take your medicine. But I just it's one thing when you walk into a shop and you're buying a mobile phone and I choose between whatever, Nokia or my Samsung or my whatever. I wasn't sitting down last summer with a season ticket form for Celtic and a season ticket form for Kilmarnock, making up my mind on which one I was going to go for. We're Celtic fans. There was only ever going to be one choice here. There's an element of they had us over a barrel. Like there was only one decision I was going to make there, and that was completing that form and signing up for the season ticket. So there is that little bit of there is that moral obligation, I believe, coming in from that.
Yeah, but just to touch on Paul John, just to touch on your point as well about the club, the club might try and play hardball here and say legally you're doing nothing. But does anybody realistically expect that the club are going to do that on the back of, what's just happened? They don't have a manager. One of our most historic seasons ever. It could have been one of our most historic seasons ever. We just got it all wrong. Everything went wrong. We don't know if we're getting back into the stadium next season in any capacity, or whether it'll be 10,000 or 20,000 or 5,000. Or does anybody seriously expect that in the next couple of weeks, on the back of doing nothing, they're going to be posting out season ticket renewals, and 50,000 people are going to put their hands in their pockets again, or sign the checkbooks and say, there you are, and we're going to back you. 50,000 people probably backed them last year on the hope of 10 in a row. Given the whole COVID message and whether we were getting into the season and stuff like that. Realistically, are households with 3 season ticket holders going to realistically pay the best part of £2,000 again to watch another dodgy stream? I mean, if we've got a board of management sitting in the at the club at the moment thinking, oh, let's just go again because the punters will back us. Come on, they're deluded if that's the case. They're going to have to come up with something, and we keep getting back to that. This for me, for them is a no-brainer. We put this on a plate for them, and it's no rocket science. They could do this in a heartbeat if they wanted to.
No, absolutely, Eddie. Now, I want to introduce to the fray Scott from the Homeboys. Welcome in, Scott. Sorry we kept you so long in the waiting room. You're very patient. And Andrew Milne, we will come back to you. We'll get the other guys' views before coming back to you, yourself, Andrew, and then looking at some of the comments as well. But Andy from Four Tims on a podcast. Good to see you, Andy. You joined us at Christmas time when we were wrapping up quadruple trebles. What's your audience been saying all around this Celtic shares for value proposal?
No, just for having us on. We've spoke at great length on the podcast. Well, we've asked fans to write in emails a lot, and to be entirely honest, a lot's probably been made or said rather about certain people within both Shared and Trust. And it always comes back to a lot of these points. I've spoke with Paul at great length about this, and the reality is a lot of people find it hard to trust, if you sort of pardon the pun. There's a cause for concern with a lot of people in the faces of these organisations. It's something that keeps coming up for us. And I know it's been mentioned in passing that people can be voted out, these things can happen, people can be manoeuvred about, but how is this going to be addressed? Because the reality is, for major movement to happen here with both of these organisations, people need to buy in. People need to buy into the cause. They need to buy into the people at the forefront. You need to believe in it. And we get a lot of feedback that they just don't at the minute. So how do you look at addressing that? I mean, even looking at us in the podcast, we have arguments about it. And a lot of it does boil into that. And I can see where they come from in terms of, if you're going to put your support behind something, you need to believe in the people who are leading the charge, essentially, and that is the people in these positions. So without it beginning to look political, which I feel it probably is, how are you planning on addressing it?
Thanks for that, Andy. I'll throw it out to the panel of the Celtic Trust, Celtic Shared. See who wants to pick up on that first and foremost. Anyone who isn't buying into the figureheads, if you like, or those at the front end sharing this message, how do you deal with that?
Well, who's going to answer it? You want me to answer it, or?
I'll jump in first.
Okay.
I'm slightly confused about the question, because the issue is around whether you think this is a good proposal. This is not a campaign to join the Celtic Trust, although obviously we would like people to join the Celtic Trust. But if it was a campaign to join the Celtic Trust, then I would kind of understand why people would be saying, right, I don't know about the trust because I don't know about this one or that one that's involved with it. But when it's around a particular proposal, the proposal is the proposal. It's very clear. There's no secrets. There's nothing. It doesn't actually. If it was accepted by Celtic, if it was supported by fans and accepted by Celtic, that would not in itself make the Celtic Trust more powerful. So you wouldn't be handing power to the Celtic Trust, because these shares would go into the hands of season ticket holders, and that would be who would have them, and they could either choose to vote in with the Celtic Trust at an AGM or not, or they could either be in the Celtic Trust or not. So I don't really see the connection between what you think about a proposal and what you think about figureheads of organisations. I don't want to be seen to be dodging your question, so if you want me to say about figureheads of organisations, well, frankly, organisations set out their stalls. They say, this is what we are, this is our principles, this is how we organise as a democracy, this is how you can get involved. And if people are elected into positions and do their job, you either decide that you might not like a particular individual, but the organisation itself seems to be positive and doing what you like, and you join and have your say, or you decide, I don't want anything to do with that organisation because I don't like X or Y. I think that might leave you with very few organisations to join, to be honest, because there'll be very few organisations where you like everybody. So that's my answer to that. It isn't about individuals. This proposal is most certainly not about individuals or organisations. But organisations, it's not about individuals if they're democratic. If they're democratic, it's not about individuals.
Yeah. Yeah, when it comes to Celtic, everybody's got opinion and everything, and everybody can do it better than the guy that's doing it. That's Celtic, that's the way it's always been. And when the critics of a proposal start shooting the messenger, you've got a good proposal. Because I've not heard anybody anywhere in the Celtic stratosphere come up with a plausible negative story about what our proposal to Celtic is. So if people start resorting to personalities, you've won the argument. And they're always very sleek at, so I don't really know what you're talking about. I can only speak for myself. I use a dramatic example. If Celtic said, we'll give everybody the option of taking 200 shares in the club if you get rid of that bastard law, I'd be going like a shot, So it's nothing to do with the personalities. as Jeanette says, it's all about the proposal. That's all it is. You can either like it or dislike it, but if you don't like it, you should really explain why you don't like it rather than trying to shoot the messengers.
I mean, again, in speaking on behalf of the Celtic Trust are no new to this. The Celtic Trust have been around for a long, long time, and their membership has fluctuated, and they've been active in a number of things over the years, and their membership has gone up and down. The Celtic Trust are, as Jeanette, just to reiterate what Jeanette says, they're a democratic organisation. Their trustees are elected by the members at the AGM. The trustees are accountable to the members at the members' meetings and at the AGM. And it's the members of the trust who determine the trust policy. And like this proposal, it was an ordinary member of the trust who came up with the proposal. And it was agreed and voted on, as I say, unanimously by probably a meeting with over 200 people there. So, there's a democracy there. There's an openness and there's an accountability. People want to join the trust, then get involved, and you decide who your trustees are going to be. You decide who the office bearers are going to be. You decide what the policy the trust is going to be. You encourage, other people to either get involved in back. And the Celtic Trust make no bones about who they are or what they are. The Celtic Trust are a fan-based organisation with an ultimate aim of increasing fan ownership in the club. That's fundamentally why we exist. I've yet to meet, an ordinary punter or an ordinary Joe who doesn't think that's a good idea. So I don't get where there's always antipathy to individuals. I remember when I go back into my former days when I was the secretary of the Supporters Association, you'd be asked all sorts of questions and you'd be invited to speak in TV platforms and in different places. And you inevitably go to, who does he think he is? He's not talking for me. Who do they think they are? They're not speaking on behalf of me. We never claimed to speak on behalf of anybody other than the members of the Supporters Association at that time. Because again, they were a democratic organisation whose members formulated policy and who we took views and stuff, and then we advanced those views in the public forum. Now, we only spoke on behalf of those members, and the Trust do the same thing. So, if people support the principles of what the Trust is all about, and get involved. If you don't like the individuals, get involved even more. Put your head above the parapet. Stand for election. Help determine the policy. Help shape it. It's open. It's not a closed shop. Never has been.
Thanks very much for that, Eddie. Now, I'm just going to ask Paul before we move on if Paul wants to throw anything else in from the Celtic Shared perspective as well on that. What Andy said, I think one of the big things for me, Andy, I think it's engagement. We've been critical of the club for a lack of engagement, and I think if the Celtic Trust and Celtic Shared come on platforms like this, answer questions candidly, I think that helps, if there are any concerns.
From my own perspective, I don't know that we've had a lot of sort of criticism personally, although the night is young. I've not checked the chats that are going alongside this. I'll maybe see that when we're done. But what you have seen, I guess, when we launched the campaign was, there's no point being precious about it because there's a lot of people out there who don't like the Green Brigade. And that's fine. We understand that, we accept that. But we've been clear from the beginning that what I would hope, even though we've got a diverse range of opinion and support, lots of people with different ideas and different understandings of what Celtic should be, what I would hope is that there is a unifying strand there, and I would hope most ordinary supporters hold on to the belief that Celtic fans should have more of a say in how our club is run. And if you believe that, hopefully you can put aside your dislike for the group or put aside any other issues that you might have and back this proposal. And that's, what we've been saying since, we kind of got started a few months ago. And that will be our issue, our message going forward as well.
Thanks for that, Paul. Now, I might have interrupted yourself, Cormac. Were you going to add something in there before I brought Paul into the conversation?
Yeah, no, it's okay, Paul. I can vouch that I definitely won't be reading back through any comments on this anyway. But no, it was just regarding the openness of the structures. I mean, I can vouch for that personally. I mean, I'm a relative newcomer to the trust, and here I am. In their wisdom, they've seen fit to let me loose on the internet tonight. So I mean, I think that's a really good. It's a very healthy reflection on the organisation, and I think going forward, it'd be great as a way of doing this. Where we didn't do this as a softball puff piece type interview. Like we put a bit of work in preparing this and inviting all the as many difficult questions as possible through the podcasts who are with us, and also as yourselves will be facilitating the contributions from the listeners. But I think that's the way to go. It's be ready, be prepared to hear criticism, take it on board, and like that. No more than my own experience, there's a place here for everyone. Like every Celtic plan, in terms of an actual vibrant fan activism, there's a place for every Celtic fan. Everyone has their part to play, So, if you have, it's no good just sitting in your living room getting angry and kicking the door. If you feel passionate about it, get involved, go for it. That's there's nothing more I can really add to that. But no, in terms of just the organisation and the structural integrity, if you like, of the trust. I think this tonight is testament to it. And I just wanted to add my own experience as maybe evidence of that.
Thanks very much, Cormac. Now, Scott, again, apologies for keeping you waiting there down on the bottom right. You're representing the Homeboys, a long-standing voice of many Celtic fans online. What's the kind of feedback you've had? Have you got any queries that you want to raise with the panel tonight?
See, to be honest, I'm going to sound like a bit of a creep here, right? I had queries, and you guys have answered them all, right? And I'll be brutally honest and say I understand it now. I came into this and I would say I thought it was a bit flimsy. I didn't, but you guys have set down exactly the queries with regards what it's about, what it's for. I've still got some Celtic shared things, but I've been in the meetings and I'll direct them to Paul. So tonight, just now, I am just kind of here to show backing to you, Paul, and Natasha for hosting this, and to the trust. As you say, I'm the representative for the Homeboys. We are big backers of the Celtic Trust, and we have been for a long time. I mean, I might have Jason fling me a couple of questions in late on, but I don't know. But just honestly, there has been a bit of confusion, and it always stemmed around exactly what you guys have been talking about. What is the club's point? What is the club's stance? And that was my query. But I now understand that we're getting into the club and we're giving them an option, right? So I don't want to labour on anymore. I'm happy this has happened tonight. I've saw some of the negative reaction. Haters are going to hate. I think what you guys have offered and what you guys have suggested is a good option. They might tell you to go and shove it, but I think it's a fantastic option, and it strengthens us as Celtic supporters, and I can't see that being a bad thing, to be perfectly honest. So nothing else to add. Over and out.
Thank you very much, Scott. Are you going to stay with us for the rest of the show?
Yeah, I'm a nosy pig, so I'll stay a bit.
Good man. There will be loads of comments coming in, so I will go back to Natasha in a moment or two. I'm just wondering, Andy, you raised one question. Andrew Milne, you praised this movement as well. I'll come at yourself first, Andrew Milne. Is there anything else you want to raise before we get onto the comments?
Yeah, I just want to go back to Andy's point, and I can reassure some of his listeners, because the reason I joined the Trust was, if I can just go back a little further, our supporters club started with 3 season books. And the reason why I joined the club was it wasn't going to be affiliated to any of the associations. Because, can you hear me?
Yep. All good this end, Andrew.
I'm just getting feedback. Yeah. And the reason why I joined the club was because I'd seen in other clubs the trouble over tickets, trouble over different affiliations, internal fighting, arguments on boats. So when we formed the club, and everybody was saying to us, you're mad because you won't get away tickets because the associations control the away tickets. And I said, we'll fight our way up. we'll beg and borrow. That club now is at 120 season books. It's still not affiliated to anything. But we do have members within that club who are members of the Celtic Trust. I joined the Celtic Trust because I believe in fan ownership. I can tell people there's no egos in that trust. Egos don't go to Edinburgh day in, day out to defend fans. Egos don't defend the Amsterdam fans and get them a top solicitor. Egos don't, they don't go out to make a name. You wouldn't join the trust if you wanted to, be in the fan media, because I've been involved in fan media for 20 years. You don't have any say. We used to go to a club meeting with all the fanzines and the early podcasts and the forums. And once you speak out against the club, you're blocked. You're banned. You're not invited back. And that's going to happen now because they've now invited the podcasts into press conferences. Once a podcast speaks up and it's not what the club like, they'll go out. So as a fan media, I don't have a say. As a member of that supporters club, but 120 season books, I don't have a say. You don't have a say with a season book. Protesting outside the ground, it didn't work. All the podcasts, complaining about managers, it didn't work. The manager was sacked because of results, not because of what we've done. The only say we will have is if we have shares. And as our share, as the trust as a unit, and small shareholders who may not be members of the trust, one contacted me today and says, I don't want to be in the trust, but I want to vote with you. And I said, yeah, that's fine. And I put them in contact with someone. Unless we have a small percentage of the club and we can speak at AGMs, we won't be heard. And we can go on to the likes of this podcast and talk all day. They don't care. They only care about shareholders. And if we want a voice in Celtic Park, we need to be in as shareholders.
Strong words from Andrew Milne. Excellent. Thanks for that, Andrew. Would anyone like to pick up on that from the Celtic Trust? Some very positive words coming in from Andrew Milne there.
I'll just say something brief then. Just to close off what Scott was saying earlier, again, I've got to keep it simple. This is a proposal to create a positive dynamic, and the hope is it helps sell 50,000 season tickets to give the new manager as much money as possible. That's all it's about. That's all it's ever been about. And if Celtic come up with something better, great. But at the moment, we've put this proposal. We've said from the outset, we'll discuss it anytime, any clarification you want, anytime. And the details up to them. So it's all about doing what's best for Celtic, keeping the money in Celtic, and having as much money as possible for the manager. And it's about nothing else. That's all it's about. And it's possible because the conditions were created by the board in December last year. Owning shares in the club is owning part of the club. And Andrew Milne's right, that's how you have a say. So the more shareholders we have, the better that is, the more democratic that is, and there's nothing that anybody should be scared of in improving that situation. It's all positive as far as we're concerned.
Thanks very much.
Paul, just to go back to Andy's point as well, but about the scepticism, if you like, among some of his listeners, the followers, the people who sort of on his podcast. I can only tell you my experience, and I've lived in probably in the epicentre, if you like, the Celtic Trust for years and years. There aren't any hidden agendas. The Trust, as I say, have been on the go a long, long time. Now, they've been active in a number of things, and I think Andrew, very eloquently touched on a number of the campaigns that the Trust have been supportive of over the years, and that took up a lot of time for the Trust. And their numbers were small. In the sort of, there were times when all the energies went into either the Damn Justice campaign or FAC or the campaign about, getting Celtic to acknowledge the fair wage, the living wage. And then, as I say, numbers was restricted, and maybe weren't great at getting our message across because all our time was taken up about those campaigns. The Trust have moved on. since then and recently, you know, and partly, I mean, I suspect one of the things that people are suspicious of is the likes of David Lowe appearing on the scene for the Trust in recent years. And I'll be honest, I'll be upfront and say I had my suspicions because, you know, David's well known in the Celtic family. He's been around for a long, long time. We knew about David's connections with Fergus and all the stuff he was involved in and about that. You know, and I think all of a sudden, David Lowe wants to pitch up and, you know, and get active in the Trust. What's going on? What you know, and having sat on the sidelines or sort of and watched that develop over the last year or so, I can only take David at base value. David Lowe is involved with the Trust as a Celtic supporter, as much as I am or anybody else in this platform or listening to this platform is. David Lowe wants to advance the idea of more ordinary fan owning shares in Celtic because he believes that that's what he was all about in 1994 and that's what the campaigns were all about then. So I can only use my experience in terms of some of the suspicions I might be doing about that. But other than that, about the sort of, you know, the politics and what the Trust are all about, we're an open book and there are no hidden agendas as far as I'm concerned. If people have got anything they want to raise with us, then get in touch with us. We're open, we'll always give you a response. The people I know who are behind the Trust and who are backing the Trust are doing it for one thing only. It's because we're all Celtic supporters and we all want what's best for Celtic. And it's as simple as that.
Thank you very much, Eddie.
I think
Cormac, on you go.
Yeah, I think what's clear for me in all of this is that the Celtic fans have something to offer. The Celtic fans really, really have something to offer, not just as customers to kind of put up and shut up, but that we can actually contribute to the club as active, empowered participants in the fabric of the club. So coming on just from what Andrew said there earlier, that's clear for me. And this proposal, it's a proposal from fans in the shape of the Celtic Trust. So that's all I had to add in there, is that the fans have something to offer as active participants, though, not just as passive customers to put up and shut up.
Absolutely, Cormac. I think events like this evening, you know, Q&A live, bringing people in, not only to participate, but to comment, and we'll get to the comments in a second, is a great way of basically, as you say, fronting it up, answering any queries, any concerns, allaying any fears. But I'm also aware, Andy, that I only got one question from yourself at the Four Tims. Is there anything else you wish to put to the panel tonight?
So obviously, in terms of earlier, I think earlier on, I think somebody brought it up that probably a problem now is that a lot of sort of smaller shareholders are inactive. There's a lot of shares that nobody they maybe bought or gained years ago and they don't really bother about it. I would imagine, or probably assuming, one of the sort of members can correct me if I'm wrong, that the ultimate goal would be that if fans that take up the share option, if it was given, but a club, that they would then sort of unite them behind sort of the one goal, sort of put them into the Trust or whatever it may be. I would imagine that's probably a goal. Now, probably a sort of double barrel question in terms of what would be, how would it be put across in such a way that, because I mean, there's no guarantees if you take any fan that they're going to actually use these shares for anything. They might just want them to be that next fan, the same as all the other ones who are already don't have shares that say, I want part of Celtic. Don't want to do it and wait, don't really care, don't want to give it and I just want to hold it. What's to stop that becoming another danger, as it already is? And I think something that was discussed on one of our old previous episodes when sort of this sort of shared issue came out, and it was proposed at first, was that there's an argument to be made that we're only in this position because of the mess that two people who are now gone, or going to be gone for the club, made, and that a lot of fans, if and hopefully things pick up and sort of Celtic get back to where we all think they should be, if that happens, fans are probably get potential that they don't really want it to happen. They think that it would be fine because they've righted their wrongs and there's new people in, sort of Dave McKay, things like that. What would be the danger of that happening? Is there going to be, how would you answer those questions for fans?
No, excellent points you raised. I'm going to come up to yourself, Paul. I feel as though I've not spoken to you for a wee while, so I'll come up to you first. But I've said quite a lot of times, success masks a million deficiencies at times. So I know exactly where Andy's coming from there. If we start winning again, start winning trophies again, a lot of fans will just switch off from initiatives and proposals such as this.
Well, what I'll do is I'll answer Andy's second question, if that's all right with him, and then the first one can be passed over to the Trust, because that's probably more for them to sort of consider. It's definitely something we've been getting on the Celtic Shield account quite a lot as well, Andy, about, if we had won the league, would this still be an issue? And the point I would make is, this was an issue last summer. This was first raised with the club before a ball had been kicked, because there was likely going to be a kind of value deficit there. Now, obviously the season's not going as any of us had hoped, but what it has done, in my opinion, as well, it's shown exactly why there is a need for fans to be able to hold people to account. And you're right, hopefully, new CEO, hopefully a new manager appointed soon, and we all want to see the club moving forward. But for me, it isn't just a case of, if the club start doing well, you forget about this. For me, this is one of the key ways that the club can move forward, to progress, to rebuild the squad, all the rest of it. So for me, regardless of how the team's playing, there's a principle here that stems from a commitment made to the supporters' organisations last summer. And people can, have their say, certainly. I can absolutely assure you that this issue would still have been raised one way or another by the fan organisations who were promised that value would be given last summer. Now, whether or not it would get to this point, I don't know, because obviously people's mind would maybe be elsewhere if they were, heading out to celebrate a league title win, etc. But on principle, this absolutely would still have been brought up. And I think that for me, it can be used as a springboard to future success, rather than when we do it back to winning ways, it means that this can just be forgotten about. That's not the way I think this should be understood. But I'll let Jeanette, David, Eddie, whoever come in if they want on the kind of first question about, that's more from a Trust perspective, I guess.
Yeah. The shares, yeah. A quick comment on the bit you've just answered, Paul. I'll use a Fergus McCann cliche. Money doesn't guarantee success, but no money guarantees no success. The Trust proposal, the positive dynamics to try and help sell as many season tickets as possible, and that's bringing money into the club. More money into the club than will be the case if the club does nothing or less. So that's what it's all about, and that means that the new manager, the new director of football, the new team, will have as much money as we can help them generate. So that's what we're about as far as the proposal is concerned. When it comes to the shares, there's two types. You mentioned two types of shareholders. It's worthwhile saying that the vast majority of shares were purchased in 1995. They were purchased what's called off the page, an application form. And the Trust did a survey last year whereby it became obvious that these Celtic shares are the only shares that these fans bought, and are likely to be the only shares that they buy. And that share certificate sort of went in a drawer. Now, of all those fans, some are active and vote at AGMs and go to AGMs. Yeah, and a whole lot just don't do anything. They're passive. That's the same as it is in every company that's quoted on the stock exchange. Most shareholders are passive. Activists are the minority. So, the Trust will be sort of working hard to try and get as many shareholders as possible involved in the club that they own and they support. And that's got to be a good thing as well. Nobody can seriously criticise that. Why I got involved in the Trust was in the first bit. Over the years, people move or flit, and the Celtic shares is the last thing they probably think of when they're doing that. So what that means is it has a cumulative effect, and over the years, more and more fans become disconnected or lose contact with their shares. They don't get any correspondence from the club, accounts, voting, AGM slips, even dividends for the preference shares. And what that means is that they can't vote. And if they can't vote, that means that those that are able to vote have a greater percentage of the club. And this is exactly what happened. Our survey suggests that up to 20% of the Celtic shares owners have lost contact with their shares. That means 20% of the club are dead votes. So that means if you've got 40% of the club, in reality, you've got 50%, because it's 50% of those that can vote. And this is not democratic, and this is not healthy. And that's why last year the trust came up with the idea of this frequently asked questions that was referred to. And I have to say, we worked with Celtic on that. We think it should have been promoted more, but that's basically something that the trust can claim credit for. The other thing, of course, is dividends, unclaimed dividends. Every year, a dividend's paid. And if a dividend check's not cashed for 2 years in a row, it goes into the untraced box. And over the years, that adds up. And that means a whole lot of shareholders are not getting money that belongs to them. So we've sort of worked behind the scenes to a significant degree in all of this. But it's all designed to get Celtic fans involved with their club. You know, we are the club, and if you own shares in the club, you own part of the club. And all our initiatives are designed to help facilitate greater share ownership and greater involvement of fans in the club. And again, that's beyond criticism. So nothing controversial in any of this. It's just something that's been neglected for a few years, and we're trying to help get rid of that neglect and get back on an even keel and get the fans owning as much of the club as possible, which was the original objective of Fergus McCann in the 1990s. That's why I'm involved. That's why this guy Lowe's involved, Eddie.
Andy, some brilliant feedback there from Paul and David. Do you feel your question's been covered in enough detail there? Is there anything else you would like to add in response to that?
No, it was just that obviously that probably fed into where the first question came from, in terms of it would seem logical that the trust, if this was given, that they would want fans to then sort of come together and back them through their own sort of channel, and whatever way that may be. They'll know more than I do, and I think that's where a lot of the queries came when we asked the question to a lot of people, in terms of that, right, okay, if we do go for this, the trust are really the only sort of vehicle there is out there for Celtic fans for that to happen. And that's why the questions were coming up, because people probably, it was said earlier, that a lot of stuff was neglected. People probably don't understand it. They don't understand how it works. They don't understand anything sort of great in depth other than what's put out. So that was probably where both the questions sort of fed into each other, and a lot of sort of the discussions we've had came around. So hopefully for our listeners, that's cleared up some of their queries or answered some of their questions. So, just for that.
Right. No, that's excellent. And I'm aware, Natasha, you are looking through the comments, which can be a full-time job at times. Is there anything interesting before we wrap up the debate? Anything that's coming through?
Yeah, there are a couple of questions I want to touch on that we've been seeing a bit of a recurring theme coming through. And, people are saying, this is great, we like the idea, and maybe they're being overly optimistic. But for example, are we not jumping the gun with this proposal? Should we not wait and see what the club are going to do? Will they reduce the price of the season tickets? Now, is this being overly optimistic, and how long will we wait for the club? What would you say to someone who says that it should be the other way round, that we should wait and see what they propose before coming up with ideas of our own?
Well, the problem with that is that the club agreed last June that they would discuss with the fan organisations exactly what the proposal would be. And they agreed to do that, and they made that statement public on the 23rd of June that that's what they would do. So it wouldn't make sense then for us to say, wait to see. Sorry, that's my job back. It wouldn't make sense then for us to say, well, we'll just wait and see what they come up with, because in actual fact, that wasn't the agreement. The agreement between the club and 7 Celtic supporters organisations was that they would discuss with us what they would do to address this issue. that's why we've come up with a proposal, because we're trying to be proactive and positive about it. And if the club wants to come back and say, no, we've got a different proposal, then great, and it will be up for the fans to think about what that might be and have that conversation. But the club hasn't come up with another proposal, and actually neither has anybody else. So you have a problem, because if you genuinely believe that the club is going to come out and say, yeah, we're going to knock 100 or 200 quid or whatever off the season ticket in a season where money is going to be, every penny will be a prisoner for me. If they genuinely think that, I think they're deluded. I don't think the club can afford to do that and still have any prospect of sort of, pushing forward next season and trying to right the wrongs of last season. I don't think they can afford to do that.
But the other thing about that is there's been a whole debate raging all season amongst the Celtic supporters about the inadequacies of what they were getting for their money and the poor stream, the poor access, all of that in Toppy, the poor football and the poor product on the park. So there's a debate raging. So what are the Celtic Trust meant to do? Sit back and say nothing? If we were all to sit back and just wait for Celtic to make decisions and then have a debate about it, we wouldn't really get anywhere, would we? So the debate's healthy. We had a healthy debate about this at our members' meeting. I keep saying that with over 200 people there, and we came up with a proposal which we thought was good. Now, we didn't go with a song and dance on it right in the back of that meeting, saying, here's this great proposal, let's put pressure on the club to support it. We gave it to the board and we asked the board to consider it, in good faith. And we're waiting them we're still, having done that, we're still waiting them to come back with a definitive answer and whether we're going to back it or not, or with an alternative. But come on, our supporters seriously expecting us just to sit back and wait until Celtic make decisions on everything before there's a discussion or a reaction amongst the Celtic. All these podcasts and websites and everything else would be redundant if that was the case. We just sort of sit back and wait to Celtic tell us what they're going to do for us.
Thanks, Eddie. Cormac, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I won't waffle on too long. Sorry, but I think it just comes back to whether you want to be passive or whether you want to get engaged, and that's exactly as Eddie is saying there. There's this debate going on now. Do we just sit back and say, "Oh, what are Celtic going to do?" Or do we start coming up with solutions? That's just to add that. Yeah, sorry, I'm probably just
thanks,
what Eddie said.
Cormac. Thanks. David, I'm going to come to you with the next one because this is touching on something you discussed earlier. And this is about the sort of faceless fan concern. So I'll bring that one up. So you said that fans don't historically sell shares, which is true. How would you answer someone saying that was an emotional investment at the time by a different generation? And how can you mitigate the risk of a company like Lindsay Train swooping up these shares from fans who aren't bothered about them and would prefer the money at the outset?
Well, there's got to be shares for them to swoop up, but that's the second part. The first part is, what are you saying, that the current generation of fans have a different mindset than an earlier generation of fans, or is the questioner saying that? All I know is that Celtic in the 1990s were in a bad place. We didn't have a stadium, we didn't have any money, we didn't have any management, and we were miles behind the old Rangers. So, Fergus McCann and others appeared in the scene. We had a big share issue, and Celtic fans supported it in world record numbers when the club needed them most. And it may well still be a record. I don't know. So they did that because they did that to support the club, and the money that they put in, the money that Fergus McCann, myself for that matter, Dermot Desmond for that matter, and very many others, John Keane, fans rich and poor, old and young, Europe, the States, Canada, whatever, all sort of rallied round the flag, so to speak, and helped set Celtic on a positive direction. So that was at a time of crisis, and those shares were made as an emotional investment. That's the phrase that's been used, and I say they weren't bought to make money; they were bought to own a share of your club. And as I said at the outset of this meeting, that statement is justified by the fact that most of those shareholders are still on the share register just now. It's not something you can argue against because it's a fact. So most Celtic fans then bought shares and kept them, even though the shares went up from 60 pence to a fiver and back down and down and down, and where they are just now. So most fans kept them. Some sold them. That's life. Some people buy, some people sell, some people hold, some people's economic circumstances change, some people die. You know, there's a whole mixed bag of fans in there, but certainly most keep them and hold them. So I don't think it's any different now. I don't think Celtic fans are less emotional now than they were a generation ago. And I do consider Celtic at a crossroads. I won't say we're in a crisis, you know, because we were in a strong financial position before this all started. We had an unused borrowing facility, and we have a billionaire cornerstone investor. So, you know, we're not going to go bust or anything. But certainly, COVID has been a disaster for everybody. But we're only interested in Celtic. Our economic advantage, our money advantage is eroding fast. We've had a disastrous season. And unless somebody thinks something very clever out the box, you know, we're not going to sell 50,000 season tickets. I've yet to speak to a Celtic fan that thinks that as things stand, we're going to sell 50,000 season tickets. And our team rebuild and our new manager, you know, we're going to have less money unless we really sort of help push the boat out here. And that's what this proposal does. But to come back to the question of the shares, number one, we don't know if Celtic are going to accept it. Let's assume they do. Number two, we don't know whether it's going to be 50 quid, 100 quid, 200 quid or more. And then we don't know how many people are going to accept it. Is it half? Is it a third? Is it 10%? And then of that percentage, you know, suddenly a whole lot of them are going to dump them in the market. These are people that by and large are fans by and large, don't own any other shares if the current survey is right. So the idea of Lindsay Train standing in the market, sweeping up shares is preposterous. They've got 18% just now. And every time they buy a share, they've got to make an announcement. So I just don't see it happening. They never got the shareholding they have because small emotional shareholders sold them the shares. They've got the shareholding they have because a few fat cats sold them the shares. So it's the fat cats you've got to watch out for, not the ordinary Celtic fan. And that's
Thanks,
a fact.
David. Yeah, thanks, David. Just touching on something you said there earlier, which has come up in the comments a few times. You said, you know, the club could come out with something or they could say no. The first part of this question is, what happens if the club do say no? What if they do reject this? And maybe one for Paul would be, and what happens to Celtic Shared if this proposal is rejected? What would your next steps be from there? Paul, I'll come to you first, actually, on that second part. What happens if the proposal is rejected, and where do Celtic Shared go from there?
Sorry, Paul, your audio's
there,
dropped
Paul.
out.
Yeah, I just realised I muted. Apologies, hit that accidentally.
On you go, no problem.
If the proposal's rejected, then the ball is in Celtic's court. A fan organisation has put together what is a pretty competent proposal that's supported by others, and they've put that in a formal way to the club. If the club have decided to reject that, then for me, the role of coming up with the next idea falls to the club. In terms of Celtic Shared, we're not a single issue campaign, and we're never set out to be. You know, we are seeking to a campaign to increase the supporter voice within Celtic Football Club. It just so happened that this sort of proposal was created and put together by the Trust in the early days of the Celtic Shared campaign, and we've obviously threw our full weight behind it, and we'll continue to do so for as long as is necessary. But we certainly won't be stopping here, and we'll be continuing to campaign on all of these issues going forward.
Thanks, Paul. A lot of people are just coming into the show now and are just sort of catching the end of it. Just a reminder to everyone in that position, this will be available to watch on all of our social media channels and on YouTube once we've wrapped up. But I'll put this out to the panel and someone can jump in here. If someone has just started watching this now, how would you sum up what the proposal is, why it's a good idea, and why this is the best option for the fans? Let's have a couple of sentences on that, just for people who have tuned in now, and so we can have a bit of a summary on that.
The proposal is that if the club has made a commitment that it will maintain the value of the season book, that will have to involve some offer to the fans. Our proposal is that that offer should include the option of taking Celtic shares, ordinary shares, instead of cash. That's a good option because it means that the more fans who would take that up as an option, the less money comes out of the club in a stronger position for next season. And at the same time makes fans feel valued and gives them an ownership stake in the club.
Thanks, Jeanette. That's helpful. Does anyone have anything they want to add from that for anyone else in the panel?
I'm not going to say positive dynamic again.
I was just trying to think of another word apart from constructive as well.
What would you say to anyone, Jeanette, who's in the comments saying that for some reason after tonight that they still want more information about the proposal before they decide whether it's something that they'd like to back or not? What would you say to people who want more information? Should they get in touch? Is there anything more that you can tell them? Is there an email address? What can you say to that?
I mean, they can absolutely get in touch with the trust anytime they like. Trust at celtictrust.net. They can get in touch with us and ask us. There isn't much else that we can tell them. We have made a formal proposal to the club that they consider that as an option in fulfilling their commitment that they made on the 23rd of June 2020. Anything that has to be accepted in principle by the club, and then the detail of that, how much would it be, what would the other options be, those kinds of things would then be a result, I presume, of some discussions after that. But that's our proposal. Now, the club can accept that proposal, they can come up with a different proposal, or they could choose to do nothing. But if they choose to do nothing, then the problem remains with them. Because the problem remains, how are they going to square the circle of selling season tickets this year? So we're offering them a way out. It's the positive way out. It's the only way out that doesn't involve money for them. And I just can't see why anybody could object to it.
Thanks, Jeanette. Coming back to the panel members we've got on the show from the different podcasts, is there anything on the back of those questions that any of you have, any follow-on questions for any of our panel members here?
Yeah, I just think that we got drunk on success. We took our eye off the ball, and we can't let it happen again. Because that's just what, and we're all guilty. Because we didn't call the club into question. We saw the deterioration in the League Cup. We saw the deterioration in the staff, the playing staff. We saw the deterioration at the club, but none of us called it out because we were all down the Gallagher celebrating trebles. And now, when it was too late, we all joined the debate. So, if they appoint Eddie Howe or whoever they appoint, this will get pushed aside. But we can't let them push it aside. We have to say, no, you need to follow through on this, or you need to give us an option for what you promised. And that's just the way I feel that we switched off. Like if you look down to England, the Man United fans switched off and they lost their club.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And just to touch on a comment you brought up there, and I'll come to the panel on this. If Celtic do come out in the next couple of days and appoint someone like Eddie Howe and gets the support of the fans back, do you have any concerns that this detracts from your proposal, takes away from it, or that the club could be using a marquee signing to try and get out of offering the fans the additional value that was promised? How do you think such an announcement would have an impact on the proposal?
I mean, first of all, I wouldn't like to think the club are going to make a marquee signing just to try and spite the Celtic Trust and the proposal they've made. I mean, I hope they're going to make a marquee signing because the stature of the club, and because we as a club deserve it and we as fans deserve it, and we want to be successful. And, you know, as I say, I'm not hidden agendas here. We all want to get behind supporting a winning Celtic. We all want to see Celtic being successful. And you're right, we have been drunken success for the last 4 years and it's been fantastic. This season has been a blip. And I've no doubt Celtic will come back, and I've no doubt we will be successful in the future. But that doesn't detract from what we as a trust are all about. We as I say, we're what we say in the tin. We're an organisation who are committed to increasing fan ownership in Celtic. It's something we believe passionately about. You just have to look at the debates going on all around Europe now about Super Leagues and, you know, how that's taken away from fans and diluting the game and taking it down a road that we as punters don't want it to go down. So we are not going to go away. We'll keep campaigning to increase fan ownership, whether Celtic appoint Eddie Howe or Jose Mourinho or anybody tomorrow. And, you know, and I hope the club are under a lot of pressure to get this appointment right. There's a lot of big decisions that have to be made. Getting the manager in place is probably the most important. And then he'll have to put his backroom staff and the playing staff together. And there are huge challenges facing us as a club. But this is also a huge challenge to the club, I think, to the PLC. You've got a new guy coming in the door as a chief executive, you know. And if he wants to enjoy the goodwill of the fans for day one, talk to us. Listen to what our proposals are. See where it is we want to go. How can we as fans contribute to the club other than just being asked to stump up our hard-earned cash all the time? What are the fans' ideas? What is it the fans are looking for this club? So we're not going to go away despite who. And I hope the day appoint a Marquis signing. I hope to God it's not just despite the trust, because I think that would give us much more a bigger place than what we maybe have in some of their minds. If that was the reason they were doing it, but you know.
Yeah. If this were normal times, which is not, you know, we've been here before. You know, John Barnes was a big disappointment, and Celtic brought in Martin O'Neill, and everybody rallied round the flag in a big way, and we went on to some good things. Something similar happened with Ronnie Dahlia. You know, they bring Brendan Rodgers in, everybody rallies round the flag. You know, our positivities around the whole thing. But I think it's a little bit different this time. It's different for two reasons. Number one, we've shelled out 25 million and not seen a game. Number two, three reasons. There was a commitment made on the 23rd of June to offer value. Number three, the season's been disastrous. So these three things all together. And number four, we're not going to have full capacity stadiums or stadia for the start of the season. So when you blend all those four things together, that's a very negative cocktail, and the likelihood of selling 50,000 season tickets with all the money going to the new manager and the new director of football is the likelihood is poor. So Q proposal from Celtic Trust to help stimulate season ticket sales, get as much season tickets sold as possible, and that's what our proposal seeks to do. And I think that's really what it's all about. Sorry.
Thanks, Paul. Briefly, David? I don't want to interrupt David. He talks about the sort of negative cocktail. But as you say, Natasha, what happens if Celtic appoint Eddie Howe Monday morning, and that's the news that hits the papers? But imagine they appointed Eddie Howe and announced that they were going ahead with this proposal. That negativity, losing the 10, potentially getting into another season without fans, I think a lot of that would take more of a back seat, and you would really see an enthusiasm, sweep across the entire support. So you can look at the negatives, but you can look at the positives too. If they bring in a manager of sufficient quality and they want to make sure that the fans are on board, if they put this out alongside it, the support in the club will be united again, and hopefully it will ensure that we can go into next season and fight on all fronts again to reclaim our title.
Thanks, Paul. One question just to finish up with. On you go, Cormac.
Sorry, it was just with regards to that same question. When you strip it back, actually, when you take all the emotion out of it, it actually just comes back to the very, very straightforward point that it's about the club delivering on the commitment that they gave. It's as simple as that. So when you strip all the emotion out of it, this proposal wasn't born out of us throwing the toys out of pram because we've had a crap season. It's about delivering on that commitment that was made to supporters when they stumped up. So regardless of whether Eddie Howe is promoted, is appointed or not, the proposal still remains. However, what the proposal does is it tries to reconcile that so that it's a win-win and we can move forward together positively. That was all I wanted to throw in there.
Thanks, Cormac. No, that's a good summary. David, I'm going to put one last question to you just before we start to look to finish up.
Yep.
And people have been questioning the £25 million value that we've put on this. Now, I know it's very difficult to put an exact figure on this, but how did you reach that calculation, and where did you get this value from?
Yeah, it's a benchmark, so it's 50,000 times 500. I think the cheapest season ticket off the top of the head was £510. But there's VAT in there as well, and it's a benchmark figure. It's not supposed to be a scientific figure. So if it's not 25, it's still a big number. So I'm not really that concerned about what the number is. It's a big number. It's a significant number, and it's the most important number.
Thanks, David. Just a question that's come up in the chat a few times that I wanted to get to.
Sure.
Just coming back before we finish up, a couple of the podcasts still on. Anyone have any questions they want to put to the panel before we finish?
I just hope the new manager has a magic wand. Because I had a look
Don't we all?
I had a look at the Champions League route today, and it's not looking pretty.
We certainly need to have some news soon, I hope, Andrew. But I've got to thank everybody for getting involved tonight. I think it does show that Celtic fans can come together, even if it is just a debate. And we've seen how well that can happen tonight, for sure. I need to thank Paul Quigley. Thank you very much for pulling this together in a very short space of time. You're representing the Celtic Shared. Also Cormac Ryan, as well as David Lowe, Eddie Toner and Jeanette Fenley from the Celtic Trust. Tonight we've had Four Tims in a podcast with Andy. Thanks for joining us. Earlier on we had Kev from North Curve Celtic, Hamish from 67 Hail Media, and we've also had Scott tonight from the Homeboys and Andrew Milne from More Than 90 Minutes. It's been an absolute pleasure from a Celtic State of Mind, and hopefully we can do it again. Thanks everybody for getting involved in YouTube, Facebook and Twitter discussions, keeping it as clean as possible. And these guys are there to be contacted. Get in touch with them. And if you can't, get in touch with us and we'll pass your messages on. Thanks everybody for joining us on tonight's Celtic Trust and Celtic Shared live event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for